Okay, so let's talk about blow drying. Yes. We're going to talk about foundations of blow drying. So what is kind of important about this particular, oh, thanks, Shannon. Appreciate that. She said I have a nice jacket. Appreciate it. What's important about blow drying is that we want to set things up from the very beginning with some type of intent and structure behind it, so that we're not just wasting time and taking time doing things that are unnecessary. How many of you, type into the chat, how many of you have one or maybe two favorite brushes that you use for almost every single blow dry in the salon? Maybe a paddle brush and a round brush, and we use these two on every single guest, almost no matter what. We do kind of the same exact blow dry on most of our guests. Come on, don't be shy. Say, I do, yes, or something that lets me know. And it's just because of habit, especially if you're busy in the salon, you have a lot going on. It's so easy to just get into these habits of, well, I know I can get a good result through this certain process, so I'm going to stick to that process. So what we'd like to do today is talk about creating a foundation for your blow dries, so you have a little bit more diversity to it, and you can think more about what's the fabric that's sitting in my chair, and also even kind of who is the client sitting in my chair, so that you kind of give them just something customized to them themselves, okay? So the first thing that we do on almost every single blow dry, sorry, I have my studio set up for more of like presentation style, so it's not my usual hair setup in my studio right now, so I might bumble a little bit. I'm gonna get rid of this too, so it's not behind me. Some type of pre-drying process. So what we mean by pre-drying is where we start with wet hair, and we need to start to do something to move the hair towards the direction of the finished hair, or the finish from Finland. The finish from Finland. But we want to start to set up the hair in a certain direction. So if we have this client with this fabric that is kind of thick and maybe coarser and it's got some curl to it, and we want to create something smooth versus maybe this client that is a little bit finer, straighter fabric, and she wants some volume, we want to start to remove water from the hair in a way that supports the direction we want the hair to move. So let's start here with someone that has kind of thicker, coarser, curlier hair. With this particular guest, most of the time we set up something called wrap drying for most of our guests, and it's because it's a way to control the hair and also remove water from the hair quite quickly. The wrap drying process can move in two different directions. Hold, please.
I gotta say, Andrew,
I didn't fall over, Kurt.
Yeah, this is a great day of responding on the fly. Let's just get on with our show and see if we can find a way to get this exactly the way we planned it.
I had to get this. I had to get the nozzle because I realized I grabbed our
new blow dryer.
New Vision blow dryer because I want to tease you guys with this. But I had to get the nozzle because the nozzle was not on it. So this is our newest addition to the team. This is the Vision blow dryer. This is a BLDC, which means brushless digital blow dryer. So this has a brushless motor in it. So this thing is super lightweight, but the power that comes through this thing, unbelievable. So super cool new blow dryer, kind of the Porsche of our line. but I need to get the nozzle, so sorry about that. So with wrap drying, we have really two different directions we can move. The great thing about wrap drying, which really just means that the bristles of the brush are in contact with the head, creating tension with the head and moving the hair in a direction. The great thing about it is that we can move quite quickly. Simone, does the cut matter when wrap drying? Yes and no. It really depends on which direction you want the cut to go, Simone. Because even if this was short hair, long hair, medium hair, or short layers, long layers, this initial wrap drying process is really about what direction you want the hair to move. So great question. And we can kind of talk about that a bit. So if we wrap dry downward to the head, we're going to deflate volume. So we're going to keep things more tight to the head. If we switch the direction and we wrap dry up and over the head, this is called volume wrapping, and that's going to start to lift the base up off of the head. The principle of wrap drying is going to be the same regardless of which direction you move it. We want to create natural movement within the hair, we want to start to get control over the hair. But it's really just a decision of, do you want to decrease volume, Simone, or do you want to create volume? And a lot of that's going to depend on the fabric with the haircut. So to your question, if I've got kind of curly hair like this, and let's say we've cut some pretty short layers up here, I probably don't want to volume wrap them unless I really want a lot of fullness on the top of her head, because with that coarseness and that curl, if she's got short layers already, I probably want to wrap dry it down to the head to decrease the puffiness. If it's finer, straighter hair with short layers, and I want to pop those short layers and get more fullness into them, then I want to wrap dry up and over. So let's talk about the wrap dry process, because here's what we often see with wrap drying is that we get the blow dryer on, and we just kind of start doing this. Or we do this. How many of you are wigglers out there? Say I am if you're a wiggler. That starts to hurt my wrist. I'm going to stop doing that. So I think why we typically see people do the wiggle is because they're trying to keep heat from building off of, from building up too much on the scalp, burning the client. So a couple things we would suggest with modifying this process. Number one, slow down to speed up. Number two, connect your blow dryer with your brush. At Palm Mitchell the School, we called it truck and trailer. The brush was the truck and the blow dryer was the trailer. So wherever the brush went, the blow dryer always follows. It stays connected. So instead of sticking this in one spot and wiggling, which kind of spreads, yeah, Lexi, wiggling can cause frizz for sure. So by doing this, we're focusing all that air just in one spot, and we're not really getting the most out of it. Antonio, does it matter if you use a paddle vented brush? Great question. Let's talk about brush choice for a second, because that does actually matter quite a bit. I don't have a vent brush here, but vent brushes will typically have a little less tension to them, but they'll allow more airflow to move through them. So especially on someone that has super fine hair, might be a decent choice. We have two different choices within the paddle brush. So we don't have a vent brush currently, which would go here, which is the least amount of tension. Oops, I'm gonna switch those. Yeah, that backwards thing, Kurt, still working on it. Okay, so a vent brush would go here, which is the least amount of tension. This brush, a standard paddle brush that just has that nice squishy base to it, this is going to give a little bit more tension than a standard vent brush. Is not going to allow quite as much airflow through it, but it's going to create more tension. This one, which is the Artist Series paddle, if I get you a nice close up to that, let's see. There you go. You can see that there's actually boar hair bristle in between the plastic bristles. So what that does is that increases tension even more. So vent brush would be probably someone for finer hair, or just an opportunity that you are looking to kind of keep a little bit more fluff to the hair. If we're looking to control the hair more, paddle brush. If we're looking to control the hair even more, Artist Series paddle brush with the boar bristle. I didn't know it had a name. Faceplant. Yes, it does. All right, since we're working on this hair that does tend to get a little fluffy, we will go with the Artist Series. So what wrap drying looks like would be get the hair set up in a certain direction first on a diagonal. So first we're going to work with keeping the volume low and tight to the head. Simone, for hair that's a little more coarse and has a little bit, needs that heat, high heat. If it's finer and you need a little bit more working time, especially on like super fine hair, if you need more working time to get the volume out of it, then you could kick down to medium heat. Bring up Natasha's too there, Kurt. Yeah, so tension is going to give polish, because the whole purpose with adding, let me turn that off for a second. The whole purpose with adding that boar hair bristle within this paddle brush was to give tension to polish the cuticle. Good question. So we'll set up everything on a diagonal, because what that allows us to do, let me get this a little brighter for you guys. Sorry, Holden. There we go. I'll be a little blown out, but you'll let us see the hair better. Okay, so once we get it set up on a diagonal, what we can do is we can actually take a section of hair. So now we've exposed closer down at the scalp, because what happens is if we kind of take these big, huge sections like that, and then we reverse the process and start moving this way, look at where the air is hitting. It's only hitting here. Then we go this way, the air and heat's really only hitting here. So everything in between those 2 points, all this stuff in here, isn't really getting heat. Does that make sense? So that's why we have to kind of peel the sections open. So we get the hair going in a certain direction, open the brush, and use the corner of the brush to pull down a section. So now you can see we're getting inside the hair. So now we can take that blow dryer and hold the blow dryer however you need to keep your body relaxed, and focus the heat and the airflow right down there at the base and work to the head shape. Use the brush to keep your tension. Press into it, because that's why a lot of the paddle brushes have that squish to it. I saw a question too, Kurt, about the Denman brush. Good. So Nebo asked, what are your thoughts on Denman brushes? So we actually have our version of a Denman brush. This is our 9-row finishing brush. Same exact principle. They have the hard bristles and then the rubber base. Denman brush is great for what we're going to talk about next, which is to get tension. The challenge with a Denman for wrap drying, and please take this as opinion, not gospel, this is our opinion. The challenge with using a Denman brush for wrap drying is it doesn't have that give on the scalp that a paddle brush does. So the paddle brush has that cushion base, that it has that give. So when you start to press into the hair, it collapses to the head shape and it hugs the head shape. The Denman doesn't do that. It kind of keeps the bristles up off the head. Okay, so we use the 9-row for some specific other things. Yeah, it doesn't get flat enough, Paula. Yeah, exactly. Low and slow, baby. Keep it even. We go hot and slow though. And yes, Lawrence, boar bristles do give shine for sure. Okay, so good question, Antonio. We're going to get there in just a second. So let's talk about the flat wrap, and then I'll talk about volume wrap too. So when we're flat wrapping, the idea of doing it this way, and in each section, I'm just going to peel another section down. So it's literally peeling the layers of an onion. After I get a couple brushes in on that one, all that hair is on a diagonal. Open the brush, take another section down, heat and airflow close to the head, follow the brush, open, close, open, close. Now look, all the hair is diagonally that way. Cool. Switch. The bristles of the brush are going parallel with the grain of the hair. Open, take the section down. Open, take the section down. See how I'm exposing that base with each section? And now you can get that heat, airflow, and focus right there. And we don't have to do the wiggle, because even on high heat, high airflow, the hair is damp and we're moving. We're moving. We're never just sitting in the same place. So you don't have to worry about burning the client. If they go, "Ow, that's hot," one of two things: you're not moving fast enough, or number two, if your blow dryer is that hot that it's burning them while you're still moving, your blow dryer might be too hot. And by the way, hot tip, on the back of your blow dryer, there's this vent. This one, you can see it just screws right on, pops in place. Make sure you are cleaning that vent all the time. There should never be fuzz or hair built up on this, because one of the reasons your blow dryer might be running hot is that the heating elements in here were designed to have a certain amount of airflow going across them. So if you restrict how much airflow is going across those heating elements, what's going to be coming out the front is less air, but hotter air. Because that airflow that's coming through here, it's catching that heat and carrying it through. So if the airflow is going through slower, it's going to come out the other end, like I said, slower, but also way hotter. So check your vent often. So this is how we would wrap dry if we're trying to keep things polished. Might be a weird question. Not a weird question at all, Jackie Jones. Jackie Jones, do you want tension? When do you not want tension? I love this question because I love going back to the foundations and the basics. And this kind of brings us to Antonio's question too. Tension creates polish. So is there times that we don't want polish on hair? Why, yes, there is. Let me grab you an example. Superfine hair, especially if it's been chemically processed. This superfine hair that's been chemically processed, let's say, and let's imagine that she even has a lot less density than this mannequin does. But this kind of hair, the more that we stretch this hair and polish it, the more it goes flat. So tension is actually not what we want on fine limp hair. We want to use low tension because that allows the cuticle to stay expanded and to stay full and to keep volume in the hair. The more that we see the fuzziness starting to come out, the more tension we want to create the polish. So just think of it as, what is the end result you're looking for? Is it more fullness, or is it more flatness, more polish? More tension, more polish, more smoothness also means typically less volume. Less polish on the hair creates more volume, but maybe a little less shine. So there's always that trade-off to it. But that's a fantastic question. So to your question, Antonio, do you ever lift off the hair? So next option, if you're doing something like this type of wrap drying, and this is actually where a 9-row or Denman type of brush, and I think someone asked about what is it in the Denman brush. So Denman was the original designer, the company that created this style of brush. Kind of like you'll hear the term Mason Pearson brush. Mason Pearson was the originator of a certain type of brush. Denman created this style of brush. So this is our Denman style brush, which is a 9-row brush. So this is where this can come in handy, Antonio, is same exact structure. Still working at a diagonal, we can take and create tension now with the brush by moving the brush into it and now lift it up and off the scalp. See how much tension it gets? So I'm in a little bit of an awkward position because she was really high up in the air. But the Denman brush gets lots and lots of tension. So this would work great. Then take the next diagonal section, work from base out. So you're still kind of working almost like that wrap dry, but you're lifting it up and off the head. At Paul Mitchell School, we had a terminology called leafing for this. I think that a lot of people call this technique leafing. So basically it's picking up the hair and stretching it up off the scalp. Now, that type of movement is going to give you more fullness because you're lifting it up off the scalp now, but you're also able to create a lot of tension with that leafing process. But same exact concept. Start with it on a diagonal and work in sections instead of just kind of trying to take big chunks of hair. It will keep you more organized. And then the third option is that volume wrapping exercise we talked about. I mentioned to you earlier, Simone, that if we want to really try and create a lot of fullness and a lot of volume with our wrap drying technique, now we're going to start to take the hair up and over and across the top of the head. So with setting up the hair this direction, we're taking it as far from natural fall as we possibly can. So we're wrap drying up and over. Okay, we have it on a diagonal, take our section, up and over. Take our section, up and over. Take our section, up and over. So by doing this, you're moving the hair away from its natural fall. So when it comes back to natural fall, you've really put a lot of structure underneath to make that hair pop. This is going to be great for finer hair or anytime that you want to create more fullness or volume. The other option to really going to Jackie Jones's question, I just like saying your name, Jackie Jones. So to Jackie Jones's question, when we don't want tension, let's put our super fine haired girl up here for a moment. With super fine hair, if I want to create as much volume as possible, I want to leave kind of some fluffiness almost to the hair, we're going to go to low airflow, low heat. When we do this, we're going to use very little tension, and we're just going to focus on lifting the hair up and away from the head and wrap drying it just with our fingers. Because our fingers can even create less tension. There will be no polishing of the cuticle with our fingers. Even a vent brush, if I'm using the vent brush to kind of work the hair to the head shape, it's still going to start to polish the cuticle. With our fingers, we're not adding any kind of polish to the hair. Just lift and same exact wrap drying process, but with our hands. So that way we don't collapse the cuticle. Exactly this, Vanessa. Good timing on the question there, Kurt. So the best way to get volume with short, fine hair, fingers, so that you do not polish that cuticle. This is the one time that we would say, maybe, don't tell Sam, maybe even take the nozzle off and you could even wiggle. Yeah, this would be a great time to wiggle because the wiggle and not having that concentrator nozzle on there, what that does is it keeps us from creating any polish on that cuticle. It just lets that cuticle just stay kind of big and fluffy and out of control. What our fine-haired guests see, and this is a great transition to step 2, which is kind of more the styling step. So what we've talked about so far is building great foundation with either wrap drying it down to keep the volume down. You can use that term leafing, where we actually pick it up off the head to start to introduce more volume. Or we can volume wrap the hair up and across the head to create even more volume. So that starts to get rid of the water and it starts to set the blow dry in a certain direction. The next step is now we want to start to style the hair. So now that's where, again, the 9-row is a great brush. Start getting into round brushes, and we'll talk about the different brushes and the effects of those different brushes here in just a minute. But once we start to get into the styling process, it's really about where do we have to place the styling. So that's kind of a weird comment, yes, but this is a perfect example, because what we get in the habit of doing is that we think that we have to touch every piece of hair with everything that we do, which isn't necessarily true. Because on this super, super fine haired client, by doing low heat, low airflow, just kind of giving her a rough dry up and into the air, we're going to create a lot of fluffiness, right? And she's already dry, so we're not going to get a lot of fluffiness. But we get a bunch of fluffiness and fullness in there. Then a lot of times what we'll do is like, okay, well, I need to round brush it now, because we equate round brushing with volume. So we'll get out our round brush, we put our nozzle on, we take small sections. Because of beauty school, we know if we go on base, we're going to have the most volume, right? So we'll do our nice round brushing off base, polish, 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 polish with our round brush. You can't see that, hang on. Let me get my section again. Polish, 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 and we round brush the crap out of it, and then we release it, and it goes flat. Because this fabric can't hold structure, especially once you polish it too much. So you need to leave that fluffiness to it. Once that cuticle is polished on fine hair, nothing's going to hold volume and fullness. So, yes, the hair is a big fluffy mess. What will make this look polished and finished is to have something in the hair look polished. So what you can do instead is use your round brush as a roller. So round brush it down without stretching. So none of this, no working the hair, no stretch, stretch, stretch. Just come to the ends, roll it down, and heat. Just heat the brush, heat the hair. So you're not smoothing the cuticle, but what you're doing is you're creating shape without smoothing the cuticle, just creating shape. Then you can come out and just touch the ends. Just touch the ends with a tiny bit of polishing. When that falls, everything within that strand, from base to about here, is still going to have some fluff to it. The cuticle hasn't been polished down, so it loses structure. That last little bit, that's been polished a little bit, so the ends now have a little shine to them. So when that falls, it'll still have some fullness, but since the ends have a little bit of shine and polish to them, it looks finished. Makes sense? So don't think we have to go through and do everything, touch everything with every brush. Let me check your comments and questions here real quick. Will you recommend a client to cut the baby hair at the queue sticking out, or would you keep your mouth shut? Well, it depends on what you mean exactly, Antonio. We have a process that we do talk about to help to catch the baby hairs or the split ends that might be happening. If they don't have split ends within there, if they don't have structural problems, you don't tend to recommend to recut those baby hairs, just because you're always going to have new hairs growing through. I guess it would really depend on the density of the hair, the fabric of the hair. That one's a hard one to answer with anything definitive. It kind of depends. Yes, perfect, Natasha. I'm glad you brought that up, because bad me. Bad Andrew. Where's my product, Kurt?
You know, I'm looking for it from my office and I can't seem to find it.
I'm glad it's not there, because that'd be a long trip to Vegas to pick it up. Okay, so great question. Yeah, because if we're looking to create volume, definitely something like Guts, where we actually create some kind of hold product down at the base that has some expansion to it, that's going to be huge, because, you know, product is such a necessity to our finishes. And of course, we just have to choose the right product that suits the finish that we're looking for. So let's talk about more finishing steps. So let's go to something someone just asked about, round or steps for long hair, and so this is perfect. So with long hair, again, we don't necessarily have to touch every single piece of hair on the head, because this would actually probably be about where this mannequin, this fabric would get to with a pretty simple wrap dry, because she doesn't have a ton of texture to her hair. She doesn't have a ton of fluffiness. She doesn't have a ton of like frizziness. So at this point, it's really about what kind of style and finish do we want on the hair. Let's talk about round brushes and how we select them. So first distinction is material and structure of the round brush. So thermal round brushes that have either metal or some kind of plastic type of bristling through them. The benefit to this brush is that this thermal core retains heat. It gets hot fast. Excuse me. And it stays hot. So this brush produces a ton of heat. Heat helps to shape the hair. The downfall, well, not even the downfall. I won't say the downfall, because for some fabrics, the lack of tension from this brush is actually a great thing, because less tension on finer hair is going to create less stretch, less polish on the cuticle, and leave more fullness to the hair. Boar hair bristle brushes tend to retain a little bit less heat, because the boar hair bristle actually does retain heat quite well, but it doesn't get as hot and it doesn't retain as much heat as something that has this metal core to it. That's why our Artist Series spiral thermal brushes, it is technically a boar hair bristle brush, but we did a thermal core in there to retain more heat. But this is still going to get hotter faster. So even with this brush, it's not going to get you quite as much heat, but that addition of the boar hair bristle, that creates a lot more tension, more stretch, more polish. So it's really about what's the end result. Now let's talk about size, because this is a super interesting conversation. Very often, if I would ask in a classroom, which of these three round brushes should I use for the maximum amount of volume? People will go to this one, to the biggest round brush that they can find. It's not necessarily true. It's not necessarily accurate, because the larger this diameter of this brush, the less curl you have. The smaller the diameter, the more curl you have. And you need that curl, that curvature to create volume. Volume isn't hair sticking straight out, because if this hair is perfectly straight from here to here, there's nothing to support the hair to stick out. I don't care how much you stretch and pull this piece of hair straight out off the head. If it's straight, it's going to do this. It's going to go down straight. So what we need is some kind of curvature at the base to lift the hair. That's what we need. A large round brush, even if we're really careful about placing this in at on base where we get the most curvature, that still isn't a ton of curve, is it? If we step down a size, we go to something this size and go on base. Now look at how much curve that actually has. Look at how much curl that has. So a smaller brush will actually give us more pop. It'll give us more lift. There's a tipping point to this, because if we get super tiny, if we get super small, now that curvature is so small that it will have an immediate pop off the head, but it's not going to extend very far. Makes sense. So there's sort of a balancing act between the two. But we used to, there was a guy in our salon that he always had these big, huge wagon wheel round brushes, and they weighed like 5 pounds. It was literally blow drying hair with like a wagon wheel. It was just like huge. And we're like, why do you use that? Well, it gives so much volume. Look how big this is. No, because there wasn't any more curvature to that brush than there is here. Imagine this brush making a circle, right? And that's like how big its round brush was. So just something that's a little counterintuitive. But that's how we get through our brush selection. Yeah, Jess, absolutely. It always drives me crazy, Antonio. Yes. So if you've been watching our tutorials, you've probably seen or heard this before, but I definitely have to share this with you because it's one of our favorite discoveries that we've had. So when round brushing for volume, one of the things that we've always been taught, and please understand, I'm not telling you that this is a bad thing. It's just we always make new discoveries, right? Yeah, it'd be easier for you to see if I go to this side. Sorry, let me move to this side so it's easier for you to see this. Please do work in sections during your styling process, but don't pre-section. So what do I mean by that? We see people go through a lot of process to pre-section so much of the hair. The challenge with that typically is that pre-sectioning is going to leave you with lines through the shape. Because once we pre-section it and the hair is kind of cooling in that separated spot, it's hard for us to erase those lines. So mentally pre-section, but only drop one section at a time. That's our recommendation. Hi, Isabel from Portugal. So what we were mainly taught in blow drying is to go to the base first. I know I was taught this way. If you were taught this way, please type in I was taught that way, or just actually don't. That's a lot to type. Don't type that. Type in yes. Type in yes if you were taught to go base first, and mid strands, then ends. If that's how you were taught to round brush, base first, base, mid strand, ends. Just type yes into the chat there. Good. Quite a few of us were. Big discovery on this. If we are trying to create curl and volume through that process, here's the big discovery. If you agree that hair continues to form as it cools, please type yes. If you agree that hair continues to cool or continues to form as it cools, please type yes. If we go to the base first and we're trying to create volume and curl, base first, base first, base first, base first. Okay, cool. I've got some good curl and some volume and some heat there at the base right now. Focus, camera, come on. Let me do this real quick. Okay, it doesn't want to. I know what I have to do. Hang on. There we go. Now it'll stay in focus. Base, get this nice curl and heat here. Now watch what happens. I go to my mid strands. Look at how the hair is being pulled straight. So now I'm going mid strand, stretch, pull. What's happening to all this curl right here that we just spent so much time doing? You answered yes, the hair continues to form as it cools. Well, right now what's happening is the hair is cooling, pulled straight. Now I got all this great curl in the mid strand. Okay, cool. Let's go to our ends and start to work the ends. Oops, what's happening in the mid-strand? It's cooling straight. Oops. Here's your solution. Switch it up. Go the opposite direction. Go to the ends first. Ends. 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 Now watch. When I go to the mid, let those ends wrap to your brush. Oh, wait, they're cooling. Or actually probably staying kind of warm, but they're staying in a curved formation. Mid-strands, mid-strands, mid-strands. Now we've got ends and mid-strand finished. We want to keep all that great curl that we have. Go to the base, let those ends and mid-strands wrap to your brush and cool to the brush. Now we go to the base. Base, base, base. Right now, everything that's sitting on that brush has been blow dried, has been hot, and has stayed curled the entire time. Now, release that cool shot button. Now we actually have some body and some curl and some wave in the hair, right? So, big, huge discovery for us with round brushing, especially when we're looking for curl and for volume, is to reverse our process. Go ends first, then mid-strand, then to the base. Do that all over the head. One other place that this particular technique tends to work fantastic is on hair that tends to be very easy to tangle. So especially on our clients that have some frizziness, some fuzziness with their curl, a lot of times what happens is, so this is one fabric that you want to be a little bit careful on how much you pre-dry. Because if we pre-dry frizzy, fuzzy curls too much, it can be really hard to get that frizz back under control. So this would be one that we wouldn't do a ton of that wrap drying. But what happens is, especially if the hair is damp and wet, especially if they have some fluffiness to their hair, especially if we are using a high tension brush like the Artist Series Spiral Thermal Brush with the boar hair bristle, if we go to the base first and start to stretch, a lot of times all of a sudden, we caught ourselves a fish, right? So, actually it is pretty caught in there. So what happens is once we get the brush buried down there in the base, as we start to pull, anything that's tangly here, we're just adding it into that tangle. We're just pulling that tangle deeper and harder into the hair, especially with the boar hair bristle brush. So by the time we get to the mid-strands ends, we're just tangled up. So we're another place where this ends first technique comes in really handy is on hair that's easy to tangle. Because if we go ends first, ends are definitely the place that the tangles will hit us the hardest. Get that moisture out of the hair, get the ends nice and polished. Now when we go to the mid-strand, the hair that we're working out into has already been smoothed and polished. So it's not going to want to tangle nearly as easily as if it was still curly and wet. So work the mid-strand next. Then when we come to the base, now when we get our brush deep into the hair like this to get our nice tension, as we pull on that, we're not going to run into curly hair that is going to tangle up on us. So we can really stretch that base and really get that heat and tension in there to pull the base smooth. So it's another place that ends, mids, base, in the reverse tends to work super nice. Cool. All right, let's check in with you. Why do I see some stylists using the back end of the dryer to suck heat out of the hair? Seems dangerous to me. That's a really good question, Bort. So basically what they're doing is just the kind of the same concept as the cold shot. Like you said, they're basically trying to pull the heat out. We would tend to agree with you. It's probably not a very safe thing to do. Anyone out there? Type in me if you have ever sucked a client's hair into the back of your blow dryer. I have. So when I was first apprenticing, learning how to blow dry hair, we had a super busy day in the salon. And the guy that apprenticed me, he's like, okay, I'm going to have you blow dry this person. It was just in the chair for the front desk because all the chairs in the salon were completely occupied. But of course, we didn't have a blow dryer set up at the front desk. So it's like, well, run in the back. There's a bin of old blow dryers back there. Do any of you remember there was a brand called Wigo? It's W-I-G-O. They had these blow dryers. It was an all-metal body. The thing probably weighed 25 pounds. I mean, it was just insane. It was humongous. So this Wigo blow dryer, I pull it out of the bin. I don't notice that there was a black plastic cap that goes on the back of the dryer that was like this, that had the screen, so hair wouldn't go into the back of the blow dryer. Well, I didn't notice that that was missing because I had only been a hairdresser for probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 months at this point. I didn't know. Tina says, still have one. So I have this big old beast of a blow dryer. I'm working. And Tyson, for efficiency, he taught us to never put our tools down, like always be kind of working in a way that you can just get back to the hair. So one of the things that we very often did is with blow drying, we would do this, right? We would kind of put the nozzle or the base of, what the hell? Why can't I think? The body of the blow dryer. We would put the body of the blow dryer underneath the hair and then put the brush back in. Body of the blow dryer, brush back in. And all of a sudden, I put this back here, and at the back of the head, look how close the back of the dryer is. Just a humongous chunk of hair went, and it went, and it just stopped the blow dryer dead. Like you could still hear the engine going, like trying to suck this hair in. And so I flipped this dryer off, and I'm like, her hair's in the back of it. And I'm like trying to pull this hair out, and it's not coming out. It took us like a half an hour with a little, rat tail comb, a tiny little microscopic tail comb of pulling individual hairs out of this engine to save her hair. It was one of the scariest moments in my entire career. So, long story, point is, we would probably not suggest that you suck heat out with the back of your dryer. That's what cold shot's for. This one in particular, it's kind of neat. This button actually stays in, so when you want to hit the cold, you actually release for cold air, and then you push it back in to go back to your heat settings. Antonio, we don't have any kind of attachable combs or brushes on our as an option for our dryers right now. And Marita's saying, as an apprentice, I always thought that was like a cool trick that the stylist did. I think you're talking about like laying the hair across the dryer. So one of the things that we talk about really often is just efficiency. And one of the things that my old Tyson that I worked for, he taught us is that being on time within the salon is won and lost within the seconds. So things like putting your comb down when you're weaving, when you're doing like a highlight, if you keep putting that comb down with each foil, that takes a couple seconds. That adds up to a couple minutes. So he taught us things like this. So if I want to take this section down, a lot of times what we see is people take the blow dryer, they put it between their legs, they set it on the station, they put it underneath their arm, and they do this. Well, guess what? there's something you can do without putting anything down. Because here's the thing, if I want to section that and I've got my blow dryer in my hand, it's kind of like keep beating her up, right? But watch what happens. If you flip that blow dryer around backwards, oh my gosh, look, you've got some fingers available to take your next section. And it was little things like that and little things like just working like this to reset our sections that saves those couple seconds. And if you save a couple seconds here, a couple seconds there, a couple seconds here, you do 20 sections, that actually saves you a lot of time, right? So look at those little things too as you're blow drying, as you're styling, finishing, doing color, whatever it is. Just look at those places that you can cut those steps out of putting a brush down, putting a comb down, putting your clips down, things like that. Yeah, perfect, Jess. Use your pinky to hold the hair rather than the dryer. That's great too. Whatever works to just kind of keep that consistent movement and kind of keep working. Antonia's asking, can you run away when you see a client that wants a blow dry and her hair's by her waist? Oh man, I wish you could, buddy. There were lots of days in the salon. Yeah, you would see that person walking through the front door. I had a couple, they were Islander clients that, God, I loved them as humans. But man, when they came through the door, they would have a ponytail just this thick of just super thick, super coarse curls. And I would have to typically book about 2 hours for them for the haircut and blow dry. So I knew I was getting my workout in that day. And I shouldn't say I didn't want to do their hair, because honestly, they were like, the particular ladies, they were a family that used to come in. They were like the most wonderful humans. So I enjoyed spending 2 hours with them. Great question. So when blow drying before curling or ironing, do you just flat wrap the entire time around brush help? Completely depends, Courtney, on the fabric you have. Because if it's something that's got a lot of fuzziness to it and a lot of frizziness to it, it kind of depends. There's a lot of it depends within this question. So if she has a lot of fuzziness and frizziness to her hair and you're looking for a kind of more of a sleek, very polished sort of look, then yeah, you're probably going to need to stretch the hair out into something that has a little bit more polish. Because when we grab the curling iron and we're kind of setting things with the curling iron, we're not typically stroking the hair or stroking the curling iron through the hair to pull that curl out. So we would probably recommend, yes, that you blow dry it out fairly smooth first. If you are curling with a flat iron, that's a different story, because the flat iron, we pull the flat iron through as we curl, right? So that can help to start to finish off the hair. There's also, going back to our fine hair story, there are also times where we don't want to necessarily over polish the fabric before we get the curling iron in. In fact, hold please. I have no idea where my texture iron went, so I'll show you the other texture iron. So within our line, you'll notice we have 2 sets of irons. We have this one, which is our we call it Pro Results. This iron was specifically designed for you to have as a retail item. We really created Pro Results, this line of products, more for people to use at home. Definitely professional quality, but definitely focused on that person that's going to use it once a day. Our signature series, which is the other series that you're more familiar with, that's for you, the professional hairdresser. So this is the Pro Results version of the texture iron. And you can see what it has is these little ridges. So especially for people that have hair that tends to deflate very easily, aka fine, soft, silky hair, we will pre-texture gently with the texture iron first to actually imprint the hair with almost a little bit of, I don't want to call it fuzz, but fluff to the hair. Then we take the curling iron and curl the hair with that texture in it. What that does is it keeps the curl fluffier and fuller. It still looks very beautiful and very, the hair still looks done, but it has more fullness to it. So for a client like this, yeah, just pre-drying and keeping the hair pretty fluffy before you hit it with that curling iron, that's probably going to be better. So as you can see, that's why I'm like, it's hard to answer that question anything definitive. It's kind of funny. We have that answer for you very often, don't we? It depends. We'll take one more question before we start to wrap it up. Yeah, and Maria, they will have their ponytail wrapped up right until they drop you. Yeah, exactly. They come in with it all pulled back nice and smooth, and they're like, oh yeah, I don't have that much hair. Man, do that ponytail, and I was like, great question, Gigi. Let's go there. I love this question. This is actually one of my very favorite things to talk about personally. So this is excellent. Let me step off camera here just real quick. I know I have a mannequin with some bangs here. Yes, here we go. Okay, so a couple of things with blow drying bangs and fringe, because we all know that the treacherous part of this area of the hair is that this is where people tend to have a lot of growth patterns. So because there are growth patterns, cowlicks, things like that that happen in this front area, before we even cut fringe, bangs, whatever you want to call it, before we even cut that kind of shape onto our client, we want to make sure that they are up for the maintenance. Because especially if we cut something this short, if they have a big old cowlick right up front here that goes, they have to work this out. This isn't going to be an easy blow dry. This is going to be something that they have to work. So wrap drying is still going to be the first step. When we wrap dry, what we'll want to do is to turn the blow dryer down to lower heat and lower airflow so that we can slow down the speed up. Because there's not a lot of hair here, if we do use high heat, high airflow like we did with the rest of the shape, this area, we're probably going to burn them if we go high heat, high airflow. So medium heat, medium airflow, because we want working time. There's not a lot of hair here, so if we have high heat, high airflow, and we start to work the hair back and forth, it might only be 2 or 3 passes before the hair is dry, and that doesn't give you the ability to really press out those growth patterns. Step back too, make sure the hair is soaking wet. You can see it was like dripping down her face. This is what we want to teach our guest. The hair is most pliable when it is soaking, sopping wet. So for our guests that are going to have this kind of fringe with a cowlick, teach them as soon as they get out of the shower, or if they've been sitting around watching the news or reading their newspaper or something, tell them re-wet your hair. Not re-dampen, re-wet your hair. Because we want to control it from soaking wet to completely dry. A comb is a great tool here because even this brush, which has the highest amount of tension, the challenge with this is that there's not much hair here. So the bristles keep the brush off the head far enough that it doesn't tend to get a ton of tension either. So what we do instead is we grab a comb. We use the backbone of the comb or the spine of the comb to press the hair into the head. And that gives us the tension. Now we wrap dry. So we work the hair diagonally across first. Remember that same process from before. We will take a section down with the comb. So watch that happen again, because this is super important. Section with the comb, press the spine of the comb down to the head, and follow behind it. And because you're on low heat, low airflow, we're going to be able to really press and look at where the nozzle is. It is right on her head. That's why we want the low heat, low airflow, is so that we can get this close to the head. It's going to keep the blow dry much, much more refined. If we're on high heat, high airflow, we're going to have to blow dry from out here, and we're not getting that concentration of airflow like we are here. Concentrator on. Take the next section down, press. Next section, press. Next section, press. See how we're grabbing the next section with the teeth and pulling it over and press. Next section, press. Next section, press. It's all going diagonal this way. Next section, press going the opposite direction. 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 We want to maintain that high tension, fine teeth of the comb, using the spine of the comb, the backbone of the comb, to keep tension against the head. Literally pressing into the head. Pressing into the head. In my experience, this technique, if you are patient and you work it all the way from literally drops of water flowing down their face, ruining their beautiful makeup, if you work from soaking wet to completely bone dry, do not stop doing this till the hair is just completely dry. Almost every fabric, every growth pattern, every cowlick that we have tried this technique on, it will submit to you. Because that's really what we're looking for here, is we're looking for the hair to be like, okay, I give up. I'm not a tough cowlick. I'm just a wee little lab. So by pressing that out, that gets us to be able to calm the growth pattern. But the nice thing is, yes, you could just brush it straight down, but then the hair is going to have that broomstick sort of approach to it. So by wrapping it back and forth, it still feels natural. It still feels like it can have some movement to it and some softness to it. Because the other option, of course, is to get out our flat iron and to press this out. And on more challenging fabrics that have super tight curl patterns that are more resistant to the heat, you might actually next step grab your iron, but really we would just mainly want to be touching up those ends still so that we don't turn this into like that thing that goes, because that's not pretty either. We want to keep it nice to the head shape. And then from there, if it's more of a sweeping fringe, then you could grab your round brush and set in a little bit of a sweep to it, to whatever direction you want that fringe to lay. But anything that's kind of, this direction that wants to lay more forward, this is a fantastic technique for it.